Welcome to the Create Your Story podcast, with conversations on creativity, self-leadership and personality to inspire and support your wholehearted life. I'm Terri, author, creative transition coach, teacher and personality type practitioner. Before we begin today's episode, I'd like to pay my respects to the Dharawal people, the traditional custodians of the land where I'm recording this podcast, and extend that respect to the traditional owners of lands across Australia and to elders past, present and emerging. You can find the episode show notes, your free copy of Chapter 1 of my book, Wholehearted, Self-Leadership for Women in Transition, and lots more information at quietwriting.com. Now settle back and enjoy today's show. Welcome to episode 12 of the Create Your Story podcast, and it's the 11th of February as I record this. I've been enjoying 2 weeks of the Writing Road Trip Free Challenge, inspiring and chatting with writers over the past 2 weeks with my writing partner, Beth Cregan, and we've just launched the Writing Roadmap short course, which starts on the 28th of February. More on that in a moment. I'm excited to have Jo Arrigo join us for the podcast today to chat about personality type coaching and social media. And it's a fabulously fun and deep conversation all at the same time with two INTJs, type coaches and social media lovers chatting. Jo Arrigo is a newbie to the professional type space. What started as a mild interest exploded into an obsession and a coaching business. His goal is to help people find their place in the world by bringing clarity to their personality type. Jo believes that the most important aspect to self-improvement is first knowing yourself. Everything else branches out from there. If a stubborn INTJ like Jo can have a transformation due to typology, it can certainly do the same for others. He resides primarily on LinkedIn and YouTube and tries to bridge the gap between the old guard and the new guard of type. Jo and I met on LinkedIn through our mutual love for social media and via our mutual interest in personality and psychological type, particularly through the Australian Association for Psychological Type, AUSAPT. I've had the pleasure of attending Jo's session at the recent AUSAPT conference on being a new type coach, and I learned more about his journey in psychological type and personality. But there's so much more I didn't know about Jo, and there was so much more to explore, which we do in today's episode. We speak about Jo's work in personality type and coaching, the magic of understanding psychological type as a lens and language in life, being an INTJ and understanding your type, the power of focusing on your weaknesses, social media, especially LinkedIn, social media and introverts, and how to be more visible on social media. Before we head into that conversation with Jo, I want to let you know that the Writing Roadmap is now open for enrolment. My friend, writing partner and brilliant writing teacher, Beth Cregan and I are your guides for this course, which kicks off on Monday, the 28th of February. It's a 6-week intensive to plan your writing project from beginning to end, and also to map the supports and tools to make it happen. It's about planning your writing journey now, getting clear on your direction, terrain, scope and path, instead of wasting time on dead ends and byroads and procrastinating. Plus, you'll enjoy community support, accountability, guidance along the way to inspire you and to keep you going. So there's plenty of value packed into this program. There's 6 90-minute weekly masterclasses. There's a 2-hour virtual writing retreat. You have 2 experienced writing teachers and authors, weekly accountability prompts, community support and connection via live calls and Facebook. Plus, there's a bonus 2-hour virtual writing retreat with Beth and I if you sign up by midnight, Monday the 14th of February, if you're listening to this before then, Sydney time, so don't delay. So if writing's a priority for you in 2022, whether it's writing a book, blog posts, a course, family history, anything at all, we hope you'll join us. Head to quietwriting.net/writing-road-map. All links are in the show notes. An easy way to find them is to head to quietwriting.com/podcast and click on episode 12 for the transcript of this intro and the podcast. Now let's head over into the fabulous interview with Jo Arrigo. Hi, Jo. Welcome to the Create Your Story podcast.
Oh my gosh, thank you for having me. I just want to say up front that I invited myself onto the show. I saw your post on LinkedIn and I didn't even know you had this thing going. So I was like, I absolutely need to be here. So thank you for letting me be here.
Oh, I'm so honored. It was great to receive your thought that you'd love to be on the show. I'm really excited to chat with you today. So we've connected around personality, psychological type via social media and also through the Australian Association for Psychological Type, where you joined us as a speaker at our recent conference, which was really exciting. Plus, we're both INTJs, so that's really exciting to chat about how we see the world with similar preferences. So can you provide a brief overview about your background, how you got to be where you are, and the work you do now?
Yeah, so what I usually say is that I was in film school and then I did what every film graduate does is after they go into sales because the film doesn't work. And so I did sales and I was like a sales development rep and I was doing cold calls and things like that. And I was a recruiter and then COVID hit and I got furloughed. And then I was just like, maybe this MBTI obsession that I have, I should try to do something with while I have like the perfect amount of time in life to do this. I probably would never get another time in life where I get to have like commission checks still coming in, but like they're paying me to not be there. Maybe I can try to get this business going. And that's kind of the quick story of the furlough allowed me the time to start doing MBTI work. And I always say that it's sort of a synchronistic Carl Jungian type, like the door opened and it was a signal and it was like fate. And I just said, okay, I'm going to do this thing. So that's the very short story. And what I do for work is I thought I was going to do a lot of corporate workshops, but I really found passion in one-on-one coaching. I think it's the more intimate, the more you get to know people, the more that you can really apply type. I just thought that the corporate way would be better, but it's not as good as doing one-on-one coaching.
Yeah, I love one-on-one coaching too. And I think that's that ability to really engage with individuals about their story that I love.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's a lot of like, every story is unique, and I believe that for the most part, but I think that everyone is a puzzle. Not to solve, I don't want to say to solve, but there's a unique aspect about them that I think the INTJ is really well suited for, like helping find that missing piece or something.
Yeah, that's a great way to think of it. I hadn't thought of it as a skill for an INTJ coach to help solve the puzzle of the personality. I guess that's what I do, but you've said that beautifully. So thank you. That's a great insight. So just to chat further about that, personality and psychological type are key frameworks that you employ in your work. Why did you choose to specialize there? And how does type help people be more whole and self-aware?
Well, I think type is universal. It's always applied to people since we crawled out of the ocean. Type has always been something that applies. It doesn't matter what time period you're living in, doesn't matter what age you grew up in, type can apply. You probably agree, we like the universal things, like personality type has always evolved, but like the core of the people stay the same, but it's always evolving slowly over time. So it really appealed to the authenticity, my introverted feeling, which was I want to do something that is real work. And I was kind of doing jobs that were selling other people's products or stuff that people didn't need. So that really felt inauthentic to me. I also wanted to be productive. It's funny I say this because I'm really good at LinkedIn, but there's a lot of people that have made a career on being a LinkedIn coach or being a LinkedIn influencer, which is to me like the last stage of just like, it's so meta for a job but it doesn't really help people. Personality type and psychology will always help people. So I think that's what I gravitated towards. And to answer a question about how to help them become more self-aware, I think it's really that universal shared language that Jung created. Learning type is a new language. You are learning a new language. That is the hardest part. That's where most people get stuck. But once you learn the language, you can articulate yourself to yourself or to other people in a way that previously you were like, I'm the only one that thinks this way. There's no one else that's ever had these thoughts before. And now you're like, wow, this is what that's called. I think NI for me was like, oh, that is the thing that I do. But before Jung, I don't know if people knew what that was called, with that shamanistic quality, I guess. I like to say that it's when it's that point in life where you go from standard definition to 4K definition where you're like, wow, I didn't know what I wasn't seeing. It's like when you put on glasses for the first time, you're like, how did I live my life like blind before? Like, how did I even function? So that's what I got out of it. And I think it applies to most people.
Yeah, I love that. And I often say to people working with personality type, and understanding your type is like having an operator's manual for your personality. So similar to what you're saying, it's that ability to have both the language and the framework. I often talk about frameworks to be able to make sense of, and you mentioned NI, which is that introverted intuition that we both share as a dominant function. And certainly for me, and I know working with others, understanding what that introverted intuition, for example, is about and what it's like and why I do what I do was just like magic, wasn't it? Is it like that?
It is. And I think all the functions have their own magic to them. I don't know if you feel this way, but I think introverted thinking types are interesting to me because their capacity for deep diving into a subject or understanding the true essence of a thing is like unparalleled. But all the functions have their magic to it. I think in the community, there's a rush to talk about NI as if it's like the only one, the best one. That's probably just like more NT types being in the community, so they pump themselves up about it. But all of them are special, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. Just for those who are listening who don't perhaps know a little bit about the types, there's 16 types, which you might have seen around the Jung Myers-Briggs types. And we're talking about INTJ, which we share, but as Joe's mentioned, all 16 types, all of the cognitive functions have their strengths, have their values, and have their unique way of working. And there's 8 cognitive functions or cognitive processes, which came from Jung's psychological type work. So I'll put some links in there for people who maybe want to know a little bit about that. So I love that idea of that universal shared language. And where I really experienced that is at a type conference. And it's the same on the internet with type. People who understand type, it's just an ability to make connection, as with any community where you have a shared language and shared understanding. But I think the real value for me is that it's about personal development, personality development, understanding yourself and understanding others.
Yeah, and I'm writing something now. I don't know where it's going, but I'm writing something now about, that's why I value the one-on-one coaching, is because it's first about understanding yourself, and then only then can you do anything about your interpersonal relationships. So I think like presenting type to a bunch of newbies at a workshop has some utility, but you can't get that nuanced approach that you can with a one-on-one. So I think that would be the way to go if anyone's like, here's this podcast and wants to move forward. I would say like getting involved with a coach one-on-one is probably the best path for development rather than a workshop or something.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think the value of doing that deep inner work, and to me, it's an ongoing thing. You get your frameworks, you start to learn the language, the skills, get the insights, connect with other similar and different folks in different ways, and read the books. And I think that group aspect and that interaction aspect is much stronger once you understand a bit more about yourself. So we both have INTJ preferences, as we've mentioned, so that introverted, intuitive, thinking, judging, and it is one of the rarer of the types. So tell us about your personality type and the psychological insights you've gained over time that have helped you with self-leadership and with personal growth.
That's so funny. People kept telling me that I had a bad memory. And I was like, no, I have a good memory. I remember things. But then once I learned type and I learned the cognitive functions, I have memory for weird things, but I don't have like a photographic memory. So like first thing I learned was like my weaknesses, bad memory, the misunderstandings that come along with some of the jokes that I would tell, or like the subtleties that I thought were really funny, but people didn't understand it. I didn't get what they didn't get. And that was like part of the extroverted feeling that I'm not very good at. So I learned my weaknesses and I go, okay, this is what I have to deal with. These are my paths for growth. But some of the successes I attributed to being a pretty good thinker, extroverted thinking and taking action and being effective, and not just having the wild-eyed idea, but then being like, okay, what are we going to do about it? So I learned that. But then once you know what that's called, then you know how to use it. If you don't know what anything's called, then you're just like assuming that you're just walking around just like everyone else, like kind of like a zombie where you just don't know, you have no direction. But I think I learned that I had drive. That came out of my personality. And you probably feel this way. If you see something, you see the road very clearly, then it's almost an inevitability that it'll happen. As you get older, you're just like, okay, I've thought about it. I've planned it. The only thing is like, when is it going to happen? I learned that that's the worst thing to say to an INTJ is time is running out, because like you want to all accomplish all this stuff. But I learned that I had a vision that I couldn't explain, and that it wasn't doing me any favors to try to explain something that I wasn't really sure where all the dots were connecting or all the lines of best fit were coming together. I thought it was funny that they would call INTJs a conspiracy theorist. And that's just because the lines that connect don't quite make a lot of sense. So I learned in my speech, and then when I pitch projects to people or pitch ideas, I have to be like, don't take your crazy idea and tell them, like, take the more linear approach and do it that way. So I learned that in the first 1 or 2 years of understanding myself.
Yeah, I really relate to those two. As you were talking, I was thinking about how I've experienced similar things in my life. And one area is in leadership, for example. So I would know as a leader where I wanted to go. I could see the vision. I could see where I wanted to take people. But I really had to learn to then break down that vision into the practicalities, the steps of we need to do this and here's why we need to do it. We need to do this and here's why we need to do it, both for myself and for other people. Because I think one thing that can happen if you're not connected with the practicalities and tapping into the logical steps side of ourselves too is get carried away with the vision itself. You'll get it done, but maybe it'll take longer because of not rooting yourself in the practicalities of it. Do you relate to that?
I do. I do think we're willing to try out a bunch of ideas and not be sad if they don't work. But I do think that there is a bit of idealism that the INTJ has about how things will turn out. So I think like when Kiersey kind of put the NTs as the rationals, I think that NTs actually can be very idealistic about things too. So like, are you being practical with this idea? Like you're going to create the first $1 trillion company? I don't know, Joe. How do you think that's going to happen?
The other example I thought of is when I come up with an idea, say for a group coaching program, it's the sales page that is the hardest part for me. It's how do I take what I know it's going to look like, what I know is going to be great for people into language and into something that's going to connect with people. And again, it's that tapping into that feeling. And it's almost like slowing yourself down to have a really good look at, so what is this actually going to do for people and how can I put that into words?
I struggle with that. I've struggled with this whole thing. And I talked to a lot of INTJs and T types that for coaching, psychological type, especially personality, the ROI for a customer is not always apparent. If I'm a sales coach, I'm going to say, oh, in the next year, you'll have a 10% better return because I'm going to write better sales scripts. Like it's super easy to quantify that ROI. But for some people, it's like understanding yourself better isn't a number that you can go like, you'll understand yourself 75% better, or you'll have 33% better communication with your spouse. Like, good luck trying to quantify that. I always go like, if people are asking, well, what am I going to get out of it? They're not the right customer for me.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? We're talking about one particular personality type, but what we're sharing too through how we're talking is that this is the same in a coaching conversation, in a one-on-one conversation, particularly using type insights. It's clarity you can get to help you be clearer on your strengths, but also your blind spots.
Sometimes I think just the weaknesses are better because your strengths are always going to be there. You're just going to naturally either plateau or get a little better as you get older with your strengths, but the weaknesses are where you can have that real growth. Sometimes I think it's just helpful to focus on the negatives out of the gate and manage the way forward. There's some people that talk about balancing your functions or like doubling down. I think doubling down on your weaknesses or on strengths is good, but I don't think you'll balance. There's no such thing. You're just not going to balance, like be the same level of intensity and awareness of all of them.
I relate to what you're saying. What I find in my coaching is, and I like to focus on areas for development. And often it's just one small thing which can be tweaked. Like it doesn't have to be huge. Sue Blair's particularly talked about how just making some minor differences, just a small tweak in some of our areas, which might be our weaknesses or our blind spots or our non-preferences, can make a huge difference to everything.
It's funny. It's like you talk to, for those that know the type, you'll laugh. But for those that know the ENTP, you'd be like, I think sometimes ENTPs can be a bit, argumentative. They're like, no, we're not. So it's like, okay, you're not even aware of that thing that you just did. So I think once you put that mirror up in front of people, they're like, oh, I guess like everything's a debate, even if I agree. So I think all the types have that moment. They all have it. If you're decent enough at coaching the model, they all have this revelation that's life-changing.
I think probably that journey we went through ourselves is exactly why we chose to get into type coaching, using type in our coaching, because we saw the huge difference it made for us. So I think the majority of us working in this field would have had that same revelatory moment.
Yeah. I haven't asked everyone about this, but I'm sure that like 99% of the people that are in type had that light bulb moment. Like, there's nothing else I can do with my life besides this now.
Yeah. For me, when I went through my transition, I made a list of my things I wanted to do to shift from the job I was in to the work that I do now. And top of that list was get more skilled in personality types. So it was right up there. So we met through social media, particularly LinkedIn, and you have a passion for social media and very active on LinkedIn. And you also have a great YouTube channel and you've got inspirational posts, great engagement. So interested to explore that area with you. Why do you engage so actively on social media and what do you love about it?
I think it really gives me a chance to be more extroverted. Like there's certainly a persona online. I do think my authenticity comes across. I've had many people say that I've met in person or just like had real intimate conversations with it. Like, oh, you're the exact same person that is represented. So there's not like a big change. I can just tell some people have a real difference in their persona and their real life. And I think it's just a good creative outlet for our type. I wasn't really good at graphic design, but I knew that I was so jealous of people that could do it. So I learned through Canva and made some cool designs. And then I started doing some memes and I'm like, I can learn this and I can expand my creative outlet, which I don't think INTJs are known as being very creative in the artistic sense. But I think LinkedIn and social media gave me that outlet I would not have had before. And then it gives me a place to reach people, possibly clients, or reach people that just through normal networking I wouldn't be able to meet. It gives me a chance to let all the vision and stuff come out and see how other people actually respond to it.
Yeah, I love seeing your posts and seeing how you interact with people. And I love too that you see it as a chance to be more extroverted. And I think that's true. It's almost like being extroverted on your own terms. Like,
Totally.
Choosing when you engage, choosing when to create the material, but then being able to connect with people, have the conversations you might have perhaps at a function if you were together, but asynchronistically. In your own terms, when it suits you, managing your energy. So that's an interesting perspective. And definitely creativity is definitely a big one for me. I love the creative aspect of social media. I tend to focus more on Instagram, the place where I hang out, but I love watching you on LinkedIn. And I think many could learn from how you bring that creativity, that engagement, and you particularly memes and using video. You use video a lot too, don't you?
Yeah, it's more time consuming. It gets less views and engagement on LinkedIn, but I'm just convinced, and many books have been written about this, that they see you, they see how your mannerisms are, they see how you talk. My wife is in a lot of my new videos. So like Joe's a real person. He doesn't have like a PR team of social media managers that are like answering his emails or stuff like that. So when they're ready to engage with me, they're like, oh, it's like, this is the guy. I already know him. So that helps a lot with building trust because you need that with what we do.
Absolutely. And it's just a fantastic way to connecting with, people in the field like Darian Nadi and the guys from Personality Hackers yourself, authors, for example. I love connecting with, people who've written the books that I read. I just think that's gold.
Yeah. I really took a different path. I read a lot. I read all the books before I got really involved with the YouTube community. I've been kind of making my way through a lot of the books. I know that you have a book, right? Mm-hmm. Is it fiction?
No, yeah, my book's Wholehearted. I'll show you. It's nonfiction, self-leadership for women in transition. And I weave personality type into that book.
Okay. Well, that'll be one I'll have to read then. I'll have to get a signed copy though. So, and I think I've had some luck. I've had some people kind of pull some strings on my behalf. I just interviewed Linda Behrens, which is great. I got to interview John Beebe, Dario, of course. So yeah, those are the people that really have pioneered parts of personality type that we need that knowledge, especially as a young type coach. I wouldn't go to YouTube right away before you have the basics, like have the real structure of it settled. So I've been really fortunate to talk to those people. Yeah.
And I think that ability to have conversations like this, or I know you do the LinkedIn Shorts, for example, have short chats with people. So it's all great ways to connect and to learn, to engage and do it on our own terms and in ways we can manage our energy as introverts particularly. So do you have any specific tips for LinkedIn, given it's a platform that operates a little differently? A lot of people in my community, for example, are on Instagram and Facebook, not so much on LinkedIn. And I know some people find it more challenging than other platforms. So what sort of tips do you have for LinkedIn for people engaging or getting into that platform?
To come up with a consistent way that you can provide or create content. I wouldn't say get as stringent as a content calendar, but be consistent. If you're going to post, make yourself post a certain amount of times per week around the same time. So people get used to that. People follow you. They might not subconsciously know it, but they're like, Joe always posts at 7:45 Eastern time, and he's always in the morning. And so that helps to be consistent. It also makes you create content. I think consistency is better than like the absolute best content in the world. Some people say don't post unless it's fabulous content, but most LinkedIn influencers and people that have grown a decent audience will say consistency is the most important thing, showing up. I would say have a real opinion that's not manufactured. Commenting on the news story of the day is great, but it doesn't provide anything new. So if you're not going to be adding something new or unique or a new spin, I would be like, think of something, keep thinking until there's something like, wow, that's a unique thought. Respond to comments. A lot of people post and then never respond to their audience. So that's a quick way to alienate people like, oh, he's just in it to get likes and clicks and he is not in it to actually engage. I hate when people do that. And then proactively connect with people. So don't wait for your inbox to fill up with invites. For 6 months, I was only searching for people by their type on LinkedIn, and a ton of people put their types. I was just doing quotes INTJ, and I was like adding all the INTJs I could find. And then I did ISTJ the next day. So then you can connect. Then I was doing MBTI certified, and then I was finding all the MBTI folks. So that's how I built up the community that way. And then just mix up your content, videos, memes, text, pictures. Don't just be a text poster. Some people will definitely disagree with me. I know there's one person who's like all text posts because it helps the algorithm, but I think seeing your face on video really is helpful, even though it's way more work. So I think those would be my tips.
Yeah, great. That's so much value in those quick tips you've given us. And I think that idea of proactively connecting, particularly around the content that you're creating and seeking out connections is a really great tip. And it can apply to anything, can't it? Like if you're in recruitment or coaching or authors, for example, anything you do, you can use that same technique.
Yeah, I do some side coaching on LinkedIn. I don't advertise it, but people will just ask me if I can help. You would be so shocked at what people will put on their about section on LinkedIn. That's a searchable term. You could just put like A-track enthusiast or collector of stamps. Put that in on LinkedIn and there'll be like thousands of people that are into that you just didn't realize they put it out there in the world, and now you have a whole new audience of people to talk to. So ridiculous search terms are the way to go.
Interesting. Yeah, I wonder if some of the challenges people have, probably people like me, is because they used it in a corporate sense in their job role. So it was more a way to say, well, here I am, here's what I do. Not that way of connecting. So it's actually a mindset shift to see LinkedIn in a different way.
Yeah, most people aren't their jobs. Like on their gravestone, they're not putting digital marketer, I guarantee you. They're putting something else. So that's a better place to connect with them is what they're about, not what their title is and all that stuff.
Yeah, great. And your YouTube channel is fantastic too. I was just hopping in there to have a look at your latest, and you had a fantastic video there about why the INTJ will end up poor and homeless, which was a great grab title about why we don't see money as a primary focus, which I, again, totally agree with. I'm married to an ISTJ, as I know you are, and that was a great move.
Yes, smart business decision.
Yeah, I think, again, it's just an example on YouTube. You're obviously doing different content, maybe some cross-fertilization, but using the specific channel in a way that's going to reach people on that platform.
Yeah, I think dynamism or being dynamic is interesting because there are more facets to people. So like I have my professional LinkedIn persona, but then I also have like a whole nother field, which is YouTube, where it's obviously a lot more informal, but it's kind of funny, but it's still helpful because it's still all around type. So there's a professional use of type, and then there's like a fun use of type. But I have booked some of my closest clients through YouTube. So you just never know what's going to get people to be like, oh, Joe, what you said about being poor and homeless like really resonated with me. I'd love your help. Like you never know.
That's great. I love seeing the way you work, and there's plenty to learn from engaging with you and connecting with you. So recommend that to folks. Given you have so much and produce so much fabulous content and engagement, people must be wondering how much time you spend, what helps you to keep up such a regular schedule of posting and interacting. So if you could share a bit about that with us, that would be great.
Yeah, I kind of said something about like a content calendar. I don't have a content calendar. What I have is a running idea list. And now it's muscle memory now that like I got to post like 4 times a week. So I have a constant note that says make a new meme, write a new blog. Probably like 25% of my posts are not planned. They're just spur of the moment that like the NI lightning hits you and you're just like, I got to do this post right now, but that's like 10% of the time. So you can only do it if you're passionate about the subject. Like if you hate what you do, you will not be able to post that consistently. You'll be so like your soul will die a little bit each time you have to post. But for MBTI, there's limitless possibility.
Yeah, for sure. My problem's often, what do I post today? Because there's so many ideas buzzing around. But I like that idea of just having and running ideas. Just I think sometimes too we can overcomplicate things.
I think that people that are in a situation need to just start. Just throw an idea out there. It may not do well at all. I had the same conversation with Sue Blair right after my presentation, and she did like 3 or 4 really good posts that got like incredible engagement. And she was like, "Oh, Joe, this actually was really good." And I'm like, "Yeah, all you had to do is start. You have so much knowledge. Like you're basically like holding back humanity by not putting your knowledge out there."
Yeah, they were fabulous posts. Just a reminder for all of us working at our zone of genius and where we want to show up, how we want to show up, and what ideas we want to put together, and just putting that together. So one thing I've noticed is working with clients is visibility and vulnerability is something that particularly some types seem to struggle with more than others, or maybe it's individuals. So have you noticed any patterns around type, or do you find it's more an individual thing, that issue of visibility and vulnerability in social media?
Well, I do think it is a type thing. I think it's more the F types you see engaging. So either introverted feeling types or extroverted feeling types tend to be very into vulnerability. There definitely is a shift towards mental health and the celebration of those who talk openly about mental health across the world, with the pandemic even more. So I think that those types are more okay with being visible as someone that's had mental health issues or struggles, or saying, "Hey, if you are struggling, reach out to me, I'll help you," or "Can I help you?" I think that is more the F type. If you want to just speak broadly, F types tend to be more open with the visibility and vulnerability aspect of social media. But you can almost see the types so clearly in a discussion, especially an argument, how some people want to argue very factually, or they only post memes about facts, or they actively say like, "Stop crying about this." Like you can clearly see the TF dichotomy so clearly. I think that's the easiest one to see, is like that dichotomy of which types are willing to be more controversial, argumentative. There's some people that'll just like back down from an argument, and that might be more of an F type. Like they're agreeing with everyone. They don't want to hurt anyone's feelings. So they're like, "Yeah, thanks for your input. I appreciate it." Yeah. You can see that there. Do you see that? Let me ask you that question. Like, what do you see?
I work a lot with INF clients, INFJ, INFP, and I do notice that for some of those folks, the connection is really important. But what I see is that it's almost like every post has got to be right. This connection, the feeling's got to be right. So it's almost too much, becomes too challenging. And I also see that people who tend to have those types tend to be the ones saying, "I've got to step off social media. I need a break. I need some time." And I've said that before. I very rarely feel that. To me, it's just part of my everyday. I'll post, beautiful birds on my deck and on Instagram, and I'll share about the books I'm reading. And sometimes I'll do much more crafted posts related, to my book or my content. But social media isn't a drain to me. So that's one thing I see. And if people need to do that, that's what they need to do. It's not a criticism. It's just an observation. Everybody's different. And certainly for me, I don't find social media drains my energy, for example.
There are certain times when it drains me, but I do think that certain types are much more affected by what's going on at social media that day. Like if there's some sort of political event or there's some sort of social unrest, they see too many people posting negative things. They actually have physical sensations of like depression, or like something will happen to them. So that's when they'll take the breaks, as you said. And that's a good point. Like, that would be an interesting experiment just to get the data. We don't need the data, we know, but yeah, that they are more likely to just take a mental health break.
Yeah, that's right. So no, I think that's a really good observation too. So lots of different ways we all engage with social media. Some of them influenced by personality, some by individuals, and some by what's coming into our feeds. So just interesting to have a look at those issues. So what tips would you provide for people who want to be more visible on social media and on podcasts but find it challenging?
I think the first thing would be to be extremely good looking. It's number one. I'm just kidding. Well, like I mentioned, you really just have to find something that you could do a presentation on right now. It has to be a topic that any second of the day you could do a speech on it, because that means that you have enough content in your brain that you could be visible in your niche, whatever your passion is about. So that's the first thing you got to figure out what that is. I think the people that find it challenging are there's certain types that tend to have like analysis paralysis. I think the INTJ falls into this. I think a lot of thinking types might fall into this as well, where they just need to get one more cert, or they just need to read one more book, or they need to take one more LinkedIn class before they can finally all be an expert and I can start talking about the subject. If that is your goal, you'll never be ready to get out there and post on social media. It's kind of a sales technique, but give yourself like 30 days, 30, 60, 90 days, see where you're at. You might post and get 0 likes and then just get depressed that no one likes your content, but you got to be consistent or you'll never really know. So I think to answer your question, start with something that you could talk all day about and then chop it up into little anecdotes or content.
Great. I love that. It's nice and simple. And I think like a lot of things, it's just starting and learning from doing rather than trying to get it perfect. For a lot of people, if you look back on our early attempts at social media, they'll be nothing like what we're doing now because we've been on the journey, we've connected with more people, we've learned skills along the way. So I think encouraging people to hop in and have a go and do different things. But yeah, definitely start with what you know, where you feel comfortable is a really good tip. So thanks for that. So a question I'm asking each of the guests on the Create Your Story podcast is a big question, but interesting to see what comes to mind for people. How have you created your story over your lifetime?
Man, I'm one of those people that like every time I hear this thing about what is your story, people want to hear your story. Like I never think it's interesting. I'm just like, it's really basic. There's nothing like people have to hear this because once they hear Joe's story, like, oh my gosh, these people are going to be booking you like crazy and all these book deals are going to be coming in. And how have you created your story?
Something that's been a real driver or a purpose, or maybe some learning that you learn early on that's something you can consistently provide. Some people have commented, and interesting looking at type is that it's tended to be they've just done what they've done and then they've had a backwards view to see what actually worked. So, is it intentional?
I think it became intentional. Like I think my story has been one of striving for intelligence or some sort of universal knowledge that can be applied, like finding the essential truth. Recently, there was a quote I saw from Tesla, who's an INTJ, and he said something like, my brain is only a receiver, and that's how and through that, I get the secrets of the universe. And I was like, that is exactly what I've been doing. Like everything I want to do or strive for is like an essential truth or how things are all connected. So in 2020, I made a goal to read 100 books and I read 105. And I was like, okay, that's great. And that's a goal that I could accomplish, put my mind to it. But within that is like, I want to be a sponge for knowledge because eventually I'll take that and I'll do something amazing. So I think that is my story arc is like lifelong learning will lead to some sort of universal discovery that I can then apply to everyone. I think that's going to be my arc. Like, I don't think I'm going to be a millionaire. I don't think I'm going to be like Forbes 40 under 40, anything like that. But I don't think that would match the profile of me as an INTJ.
And I love that idea of essential strengths, patterns, how things are connected, and that idea of investing yourself in books and learning, discovering things, that universal discovery, the patterns. Again, that's very introverted intuiting, isn't it? The patterns, how things connect, and then making new connections, new insights to share with others. I think that.
Yeah. And just to go back to the Tesla thing, I think that all the types, as dumb as this sounds at the beginning, all the types need to find a type that inspires them historically. Like personality database, whatever you think about the site, it's kind of funny, but it's all user-driven typing. But they've typed everybody from everywhere across the world, and every literature, nonfiction, fiction, like everything that can be typed has been typed. And you go to INTJ, you look at the historical figures, political figures, authors, and you read those authors' books, or you read the story about, like I'm reading a book on Elon right now. I've read a book on Bobby Fischer, and I'm like, these guys had the same, in a way, mindset that I did, and look what they did. So ENFP could do the same thing with famous ENFPs, read their story, read their struggles, like, because I believe things are cyclical. So if you can see where things are going, or other ENFPs or ISFPs have been, I think they'll be more valuable than just randomly reading books because like they're a top seller.
Yeah, absolutely. I did my training with Mary McGuinness, who you might know, the Australian psychological type leader, and she's a great lover of memoir and story and biography. And when you're training with her and spend time with her, she's talking about people's stories, and that's what I'm interested into. That idea of, as you just mentioned, read the memoir, find the inspiring stories, find people maybe like you, and look at their life story and see what you can learn from it. So that's great advice. So the other question I'm asking folks, so my book Wholehearted is about self-leadership. for women in transition, applicable to men as well. And I have 15 wholehearted self-leadership tips in there. So I'm just interested in what your top wholehearted self-leadership tips and practices might be, whatever that means to you. So again, just drawing from your experience, what would you draw out as a few key tips to give to others to help them with leading themselves through life?
Yeah, this is a question that comes up in my coaching. And I was going to mention it earlier, but this is a perfect time for it. First thing, it's like FI. It's the what's your values, what's your inner compass. Most people will not admit it. They really won't. When you say, what do you want to do? They'll give you like some answer. That's not actually what they want to do, because either they're embarrassed that society would say, oh, no, you want to do that? No, that's never going to make any money, or that's so childish, or like, how are you even going to do that? So they just don't tell you really what they want to do. Like, I want to do greeting cards. I want to write greeting cards. Feel like they're never going to make any money. So they just don't, they're not honest with themselves. So then they pursue things that are like only half-heartedly into. So I would say like your North Star, whatever you want to call it. Then once you do that, you can have passion towards actually accomplishing your goals. Like in terms of self-leadership, it's kind of funny because I really have been promoting the 8 Keys to Self-Leadership book by Dario, which is kind of a perfect way to just open the book, look at any page and go, oh, can I do that well? Oh, I need to really ask myself this question about introverted sensing. Am I making the same mistakes a bunch or something like that? In terms of self-leadership, I was doing an interview with another INTJ, and he just said the first thing is make sure you're not lying to yourself. Make sure that you're internally consistent with your beliefs. Like, don't criticize people for being overweight and drinking while you're at a bar. You know what I mean? So I think that would be the number one thing, is don't deceive yourself, which is why I get so upset with people when they use their title, their position as a way to say that I don't need to develop. I'm already the C-level person at this company. Like, I'm done. Like, that's just self-deception right there.
I love that. Just starting with your values, which for some people will be quite natural, and for others it won't be so natural. Your values, I guess, are pretty consistent, but they get shaped over time, and you're clearer about them over time. So I think that's great advice. And Dario's book, 8 Keys to Self-Leadership, Nadi, is, I'll pop it in the show notes. It's mentioned in my book. It's a great resource, one I use a lot in my coaching as well. And it's that idea that it's each of the 8 cognitive processes and functions. And as you've said, Jo, just that ability to open at any page and have a think about introverted thinking, extroverted feeling. Where does that sit? You don't have to have a huge knowledge of personality type to just dive in, understand more. And Dario's a very accessible author and based in neuroscience, so it's a great place to start. So yeah, thanks for that tip too. Okay, so that wraps up our conversation for today. It's been fantastic chatting with you. Where can people find more about you and your work online, Jo?
I would say, first, thank you for having me. This was really fun. I could talk double this amount of time about personality types, so could you. So thank you for having me. This has been awesome. And I really think LinkedIn is the place where I'm at the most. I respond to direct messages. You don't need to fill out a form. It won't take me 24 hours to get back to you. So if you want to engage, we can do that on LinkedIn. My YouTube channel is Ghost of Young, so I also respond to comments there. But I would honestly say LinkedIn is the place to start.
Great. I've certainly loved connecting with you on LinkedIn, and you're definitely a great person to engage with, both your posts themselves, but also just chatting and getting to know you. And I know many people have taken that opportunity to encourage others to do the same. So thanks again, Jo. It's been a real pleasure talking with you today. And yeah, I agree, we could chat all day about all these fascinating topics. But I hope what we've shared will be really of interest to people and gives them some tips for going further with social media, with psychological type, with thinking about themselves. So thank you. Appreciate you spending the time chatting today. Take care.
Yeah, this has been great. Thanks, Terri.
Thanks for listening today, and I hope you found it inspiring and supportive. You can find the episode show notes, get your free copy of Chapter 1 of Wholehearted, and find out more about my books, coaching, and other offerings at quietwriting.com. Connect with me on social media, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, where I am at Writing Quietly. Please leave a review on your favourite podcast app too to help others find the show and create their story. And warmest wishes for you as you create your story in the world.